You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders, getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday. Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
I feel like it is deja vu all over again because the Seahawks matchup that we are talking about this week, it is the same Seahawks matchup we were talking about 2 weeks ago. But John Boyle from Seahawks.com, this has a much different feel to it.
Yes and no, because I kept forgetting that Week 18 wasn't a playoff game because it felt so significant with the stakes. Like literally, there were a couple times I'm like, oh yeah, the whole league's playing. This isn't the playoffs. This is just such a massive game. But yeah, I mean, home playoff game. First time we're gonna have fans in the building for a home playoff game since 2016 season. I'm so excited to see what that stadium looks like. A Saturday night. Fans don't have to worry about work and school the next day, so they can get rowdy. It's going to be...
They can avoid the I-5 mess by just getting down there early to really start that pregame, that pre-funk. I'm all for that. That's great.
Take transit, whatever you need to do. Get there safely. Yes,
that's exactly right. You mentioned 2020. I know exactly where I was in 2020. I was sitting in an end zone suite spread out from the rest of the pre- and post-game crew with our producer, NASA Chobe, and it was quite possibly the most depressing game I have ever watched.
Weird, yeah.
It was not great, and we just kind of looked at each other in the first half. We're like, what just happened here? Yeah. Like it was not great. So 12s, you were going to make a huge difference. The guys have talked about this all week long, quite honestly, all year long, the difference the 12s have made. And we have mentioned a number of times the guys who recognize how hard it is to get back to the playoffs.
Yeah.
It feels like, with the way this defense was playing and the way this team was rolling, it was a foregone conclusion for the last several weeks of the season that you would be in the playoffs in some way, shape, or form, right? But then you talk to a guy like Jarran Reed, who has experienced a lot of success. He has gone through the valleys, and he knows exactly what this means this week.
It definitely feels good, man, to be playing as long as I have and to be able to get back to the playoffs, especially here in Seattle, man. It's real special. And I said that a couple weeks ago after we had won the NFC, man, it felt good to be able to be here, when we brought it back home. But, we got more work to do. The job is not done.
Yeah, I mean, in the perspective Jarran's coming from is not just someone who knows how hard it is to get to the playoffs, but to be in this position where you're the number one seed, you're getting a bye, you get potentially 2 home games. Like this team's good enough to win on the road. We've seen that they're 8-1 on the road this year, but that's a hard path to go in the postseason when you got to play 2-3 games on the road. So to earn what they did, being the number one seed, and there's a reason all 3 times the Seahawks in their history have been in the Super Bowl has been as a 1 seed with those 2 games at home, and they're hoping to take that path again.
Look, I will say that the amount of conversation and the intensity, it certainly ratchets up, right? You were 2 wins away from getting to the game that you have been dreaming of since OTAs, and you know that you're going to have to come through, right? Also, when you take a look at what happened around the league on Wild Card Weekend, the number of injuries that took place, not having that game. And look, injuries it's awful. And Coach said this week, look, it sucks. There's no way around it, right? You don't wish that on any of your enemies. The fact that you didn't have to have that is also another one of those benefits, right? You get the rest and you didn't put anybody in danger.
Yeah, not only did nobody get hurt, but you got an extra week for guys to get healthy. We saw, full participation in practice from Charles Cross, from Kobe Bryant, guys they've been without. So they're going to go into this game, very different from the 49ers who have been banged up all season. The Seahawks are going to go in the game with, they got a few guys on IR, but they're going to have most of their team available. Yeah,
we will get to Charles Cross in just a second and a conversation from the rookie, Gray Zabel, but the injury that happened for the 49ers this last weekend is George Kittle, right? And that was a tough one to see. And we commented on how we just appreciated his approach after Seattle clinches in San Fran. I got to be honest, John. I do not say this about opponents. I kind of appreciate his approach to his injury, too. Did you see that?
Tequila from the owner's suite.
I mean,
I feel like that's a very real world how we would handle.
That's exactly
news.
How I would handle that. Like, it might not be tequila. I'm not. Yeah. That is not my. That is not my beverage of choice. I would have several bottles of champagne delivered to my locker room. But yes, I do. I feel like that was very real world. That certainly changes the equation for them. They signed a tight end off the practice squad. They're going to have to figure out what that looks like. They likely will have Trent Williams back, so that makes a big difference. Fred Warner has been designated to return for the 49ers. Now, I think that is probably a stretch, considering how gruesome that injury was in week 6. You were talking about a broken and dislocated ankle. We have seen that from a couple of guys.
Yeah,
it usually takes longer than this window of time.
Yeah, and what it sounds like from what we've heard from Kyle Shanahan is most likely the goal is get him on the practice field now, so if they make it as far as the NFC Championship game, he could maybe come back then. Obviously, the Seahawks are hoping he doesn't get that chance.
Right. But there has been some friendly banter this week between Fred Warner and Uchenna Nwosu, and it is not limited to that. And I do believe that it is friendly banter in that case, although who knows how much is simmering just underneath the surface. Because, look, it is a very real rivalry, and there is a lot of, I'm just going to say, intensity around this rivalry. It is also, I think, what led to these comments from Jaron Reed this week.
For one, we get a team that we don't like. Me personally, don't like nothing about them. But, just get a chance to, go at them again. We don't do too much talking. We let our past talk. But we know what's at stake. They know what's at stake. It's about getting out there between them lines and, hitting the head on. Man on man, mano a mano.
I do like with these rivalries in division how it's like it gets passed down. Like a guy comes in who has no hit. You might come from college in the South or the East Coast or whatever. You have no connection with the NFC West, but you get here, you're like, okay, we don't like the 49ers. Done. And it's just sort of this like inherited trait and it's this way all around the league, the NFC North teams, whatever. All these big rivalries, and it does add. I mean, the playoffs are a big deal anyway, but it does add so much extra like spice to it. I mean, the biggest one obviously being the NFC Championship game 2013, but when you have these two teams that are both really good physical teams, and then that there's some genuine, not real world like hatred, but that kind of football dislike, it just makes it fun.
Here's my question to you. If you were in a position where you had an obvious rival, right? An obvious dislike for your rival.
Oh, I got one, Jen. No.
It's probably me. He's probably sitting right across the table from her.
No rivals.
Would you downplay the emotion you have around it, or would you be outspoken and be the person who's up front, maybe kind of throwing down the gauntlet a little bit?
I think I'm more the downplay it.
Yeah.
Might get a little subtle jabs in here or there where appropriate, but I don't think I'd be like the brash.
Right.
Talking.
I always wish, and I've said this many times, I so wish I had the personality of like a Richard Sherman who could talk trash and back it up. I do not.
Yeah.
I would talk trash and then I would immediately apologize. I would regret it. I would be trying to make everybody feel better so that I didn't have a target on my back. I do actually like, the confidence that goes along with it. Some would say ego, some could say brashness. I mean, I did just say brash. But I do think that comes with the confidence of knowing where you're at in the season, what your abilities are, and quite honestly, when you're talking about this defense, how good you feel in this system right now. And why wouldn't you? You are the best defense in the league based on the metrics. By the way, timeout. We're not diving into a whole lot of metrics in this episode because you throw all of that out the window in the playoffs. And that's actually what Jaron Reed was responding to, is how different or, how unique it is to play the same team back-to-back games, but have it be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know that anything in the previous matchups matter this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're going to obviously study that film and study tendencies, but as Mike McDonald talked about on Monday, games, the term he likes is how a game declares itself. And, I go back I noticed some 49ers fans trying to kind of cope with that loss, be like, oh, the Seahawks only scored 13 points. They weren't trying to, march down the field and score fast in that game. Their defense was shutting them down, and they bungled the red zone a couple times and could have scored more points. It was they took 8 minutes off the clock, weren't really worried about scoring at that point, and that's not really relevant to this point, bigger picture, but it's that's how that game went, and that's how it went, how it Mike's term, declared itself. This game, one of the teams could go score right off the bat, and the other team could answer, and all of a sudden now offenses start calling plays differently, and it's a higher scoring game. I don't think you go in this game and be they only scored 3 points and got 173 yards. We're just going to shut them down again.
Yeah, you were not looking for point differential right now,
no.
Right? You were just looking to go out and get the win, and however that is. I will say, and we talked about this right after that win, there was a level of confidence, and there was a level of focused intensity on the sideline, particularly with the defense. Not that it wasn't a hard-fought game, not that they didn't have to make plays, although we did point out that the longest play they allowed was 11 yards on the first play of the game. Right?
Oh, Carolina,
yeah. Oh, yeah, Carolina, yeah.
But it was 20 yards, which is still, to give up one 20-yard play to that 49ers
against
offense,
the 49ers. Yes, all of my weeks are running together.
They do that.
There was just like this, okay, we know what we're going to do. That is a very different feeling than, oh my gosh, we're hanging on for dear life and we just need the offense to run out the clock. That was never what the feeling was.
Yeah.
There was a looseness. There was smiles. We know exactly what the assignment is. We know exactly what we need to do. And I think if we listen to Ernest Jones from this week and kind of how this is all coming together, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the why is the biggest reason. I think that's where I think our defense is taking the next step. We're understanding like why we're doing certain things, why and how teams are attacking us the way that we are, and like, okay, we are going to be in these coverages. They're going to know we're in these coverages. How can we play those plays that are attacking us? And he's been a big part of that. And like I said, the next step that we took was guys able to just grasp that and just be able to make those plays this time around.
Yeah, that's a phrase like. Talk about the why. That's a phrase we hear a lot. Honestly, I think you hear that more about offensive teams. I've heard like people talk about Sean McVay as a good coach that way. Like he explains why, and that's year one that defense was trying to learn like how do we run this defense, and now they're starting to understand more of like why Mike's calling things he does. And when players are invested in that, they really know what's going on. It frees them up to just be that much better.
Well, we've heard Cooper Kupp talk about it too, right? Just tell me why we're doing this, because all I'm trying to be is a problem solver during the middle of the game. You can scheme this up. You can show me exactly what this is supposed to be, but the reality is you can't predict everything that's going to happen. Tell me the why. I wanted to share that story with a few volunteers at the food bank this week, John, because when you volunteer at a food bank, they like to tell you just move this from here to here, but they don't tell you why. And you end up moving very large, heavy boxes 16 times because you don't know what the why is and I can't problem solve. Just tell people why you're doing something. That was a side note. That was a public service announcement, and this is a word from our presenting sponsor.
Delta Airlines is bringing more big wins to the city of Seattle. With nonstop flights to over 60 destinations worldwide, we're moving Seattle forward with 2 new routes to Rome and Barcelona starting May 2026. And with thoughtfully designed cabins, premium service, a seamless travel experience, and our new Delta One Lounge for eligible travelers, your personal off-season is looking better than ever. Visit Delta.com to book your next trip.
There's certainly a conversation to be had going into this game about how much experience matters. Where do you think it falls, John, on a scale of, I don't know if you want to call it 1 to 10, most important to least important, playoff experience mattering at this time of the year?
I don't put a ton of weight in it. I think having a few guys who've been through it helps. Having some veterans players can kind of ask questions to, or can kind of remind them, hey, this is just football. This is, the hoop's 10 feet, going back to Hoosiers, but
it's like, wait a minute, what? We've got a problem if we're playing with a hoop.
Very famous movie.
I know, but I was not thinking about Hoosiers.
Yeah, 53 1/3 is our quarterback used to say.
Yes, 53 1/3 would
feels
be
the same. But yeah, like having a few veterans to lean on in those moments, a Cooper Kupp, Ernest Jones who's been to a Super Bowl, that's helpful. But I think if the coaching staff is doing it right, and the way we've heard Mike talk all year, that's really where it's important. I think if you have a coaching staff who comes in and tries to just change everything up this week and like, this is a game of your life and everything's at stake, then that can be a problem. But if everybody's going into it, which they seem to be with this approach, like, hey, we're going to play another football game this week, let's get ready. I just don't think the playoff experience necessarily is that big of a deal. I
think some of it comes down to how many different ways they've been forced to win games.
Oh, for sure.
And situational football. I truly believe it's the teams that execute in those big situations. And I don't necessarily mean it's the game-winning field goal. I mean, you call timeouts at the right time. You were calling plays to the silence. You get out of bounds when you're supposed to. You do some of those things. I do think that plays more. I also wonder with this team in particular if some of the not knowing is actually a little bit more helpful, right? To your point. You don't know how big it's going to feel on Saturday because you've never experienced the 12s at Lumen Field for a playoff game. Gray Zabel, however, has played in a lot of games, right? We've got guys in there who have played. Ty Okada's played in playoff games before in college, right?
A little different atmosphere, probably.
I know.
No offense to,
I totally agree. But it was interesting listening to Gray talk about it this week where he said, look, I learned how to play into January. I learned how to take care of my body during a long season. I learned that the expectation is our season doesn't end at the end of the regular season.
And that the physical, to me, is the bigger deal there. It's just because that has always been an issue for rookies coming in. It's like, I'm used to 12 games. All of a sudden, I'm playing now 17 plus playoffs. So those guys who have been through a playoff in college football playing, as you said, into January, playing 14, 15 games, like that, just physically they know that toll.
Well, there's also the mental part of this now. You were playing the same team 3 times during the course of the year. Back-to-back games. Now, granted, week 1, it feels like it was an entire lifetime ago, right? But there is a mental side of this of how do you stay locked in? How do you go back and figure out where your advantage is? And there's also just learning the ups and downs, not only of the season, but within the game, which is one of the big takeaways from Gray Zabel this year.
There's going to be ups and downs. You're going to get beat. At the end of the day, I mean, I probably had the worst game of my football career against the Los Angeles Rams. Both times, I would say I didn't play great. And I just remember Charles telling me, I'm on the bench beating myself up, not happy. He just comes up and he's like, hey, those guys get paid too. And having that understanding that you got to have the next play mentality. You got to learn from your losses, and you got to keep moving forward and kind of keep taking them on the chin and understanding this game of football, things are going to go south, and it's all about that next play. So having that mentality as a rookie and being able to learn that has been huge these past few weeks.
I think sometimes like that's a good reminder to fans of the other guys get paid too, because sometimes there's this element of like a cornerback gets beat, or like when the Rams are moving the ball against the Seahawks in Week 16, it's like, oh my God, what's wrong with the defense? Like, yeah, that other team's pretty good too. That other quarterback's probably going to win MVP. That other coach is one of the best. Like, just things like that. And that's to Gray's point. Is like, yeah, these guys are really good too. The Rams have some great defensive linemen, and sometimes you're going to get beat. But the key is how they bounce back, and this team has bounced back very well. A funny side note, talk to Gray sometime about his first training camp here with going against guys like Leo and Jaron Reed, and talked about how like he was calling his dad and worried he might need to go home and take a desk job or something because he didn't know if the NFL was for him. And it turns out he's going against some really damn good defensive linemen.
He has also spent a lot of time talking to those guys. I think we've mentioned it on this podcast before. It is truly amazing when you walk into a locker room after the game and you see Gray sitting next to Leo. FYI, their lockers nowhere close to each other in any locker room. Never is the defensive line sitting next to the offensive line, right? And the number of times Leo goes over and sits next to him or vice versa, and they're just going over the game plan. They're just like going over plays, and here's what you did really well, and here's what I would have done differently. And it's really cool to see how Gray has sought that out from the veterans.
D-Law's been another guy.
Yes.
He's from the first days of camp, he's like, does a pass rush move with a young tackle. He's like, okay, now I'm going to show you what I did to you so you can defend it. That's a really cool element of this team, and that D-line in particular, the way they've done that.
Yes. Also, Gray Zabel has crushed every single media opportunity this year. My favorite comment was when he was asked about Clint Kubiak.
He's like, yeah, he's terrible. Don't hire him.
He's terrible. Don't hire him. But you know what? I really loved hearing the guys about Kubiak, and I think it's true on both sides of the ball. It's the growth you have seen from individual players, but it's the growth you've seen within the scheme, right? The offense doesn't look the same as week 1. Micah talked about the defense doesn't look the same that it does in week 1, and that is a huge testament. The fact also that it looks better, right? You didn't go the other direction, right? You have steadily trended the right direction to the point where you are peaking at the right time. And I just thought Gray highlighted that beautifully. And also the amount of love from Kubiak I think Cooper Kupp said something similar. You want me to talk nice about a guy so that somebody else hires him? Like, what are we doing? But I do think that shows a lot of love.
Yeah. A lot of love, a lot of respect for, this is what happens when you win 14 games.
Yes.
People get real interested in what you're doing, and they start calling your coaches.
Yes. And the love and respect from Gray, well, it is obvious when he starts talking about the vet who has helped to anchor him this season and who has anchored the offensive line at left tackle.
Yeah, you can't really put it into words. He's been a big brother, a friend, a mentor, a leader, everything you could possibly want from a guy playing next to you, especially as a rookie. Like, helped me understand the game more, helped me understand what the NFL is about, what to do, what to expect. And he's a dear friend. I love him like a brother. He's the man. And I'm super excited that he's going to be here for 4 more years, to say the least.
I liked before those comments when Greg congratulated Cross on his contract extension and then said he told John Schneider they should have paid him more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sure Schneider appreciates that.
Right. I'm sure that he earns and deserves more. I think that causes a few problems, but that's not for the rookie to deal with.
Schneider should have been like, well, I'm going to have to save some in a few years when I have to pay you.
Exactly. And we have heard those guys talk about each other so often this year in such complimentary terms. It is special when you see two players who recognize they are the cornerstones for a long time. And we saw this during joint practices against the Packers. It's been a long time since we mentioned this, but the team function, everybody's kind of dispersing and going their own way. And there's Gray and there's Charles, and they look like the odd couple, and they are just sitting there, BSing and laughing and being very intentional about working on that relationship.
Yeah. And especially now with a contract extension for Charles, like this is going to be a great left side of that line for a long time. And then, talk about that line in general. You signed Abe to an extension. Sundell's a young guy on a rookie contract. Olu's a young guy on a rookie contract. Bradford's got another year or two left. Christian Hayes. And they'll keep adding to that group, but to have all those young guys together in what has been a much improved line already, that bodes very well for this offense. Well,
and there was something else that Gray said that really stood out to me when asked about the play of Sundell. Now, remember, they had been college teammates and college roommates, so presumably these guys know each other very well, right?
Yeah.
They could read each other's mind, except Gray had pointed out this week, we are just getting to the point, or we are finally getting to the point where we don't have to say anything. We can just give each other the look, and he said that's a pretty cool way to play football. It takes a long time to get that consistency. Again, you're peaking at the right time. And now these guys understand the why and what they're doing in this scheme.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that makes it really cool and very dangerous.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put John on the hot seat. You know what's coming up next. We'll do that right after a word from our presenting sponsor.
Take your own off-season with Delta Airlines and explore new routes from Seattle to Rome and Barcelona starting May 2026. Plus, with nonstop flights to over 60 destinations worldwide, Delta is moving Seattle forward one adventure at a time.
All right, John. It is two things we need to see for a Seahawks win on Saturday. And because we really haven't talked about how this is going to match up and the numbers, because all of that goes out the window, I have two very easy, obvious ones.
Let's hear them.
Okay. No turnovers.
Yeah.
Easy and obvious, right? Take care of the football. You make it much easier on yourself. And let's take advantage of the 12s. I would like to see the 12s cause at least 3 penalties, if not more. We have seen some very disciplined teams. I'm actually thinking about the Rams this last weekend. Very disciplined teams who did not play well on the road. Dealing with crowd noise and just kind of getting all out of sorts. I would love to see that happen. I'm just going to lean into the 12s and count on them to show up and make a big impact on Saturday.
Yeah. Turnovers was an easy one. I'll leave that one to you. But yeah, they didn't turn the ball over last week, and look what happened. Or 2 weeks ago, I guess it is now. But this team is so good in every phase that, if you can just avoid that one sort of issue that's been an ongoing thing this year, I just don't see them losing to anybody potentially, but 2 more since you took that one. Keep running the ball like that.
Yeah.
We've seen 160 plus for 3 straight games, 180 last week. Able to close games. They ran the ball, I think it was 5 straight times against Carolina to close that game and score a touchdown. And last week, there was some passing in there too, but I think they ran the ball 9 times on that 8-minute drive, a couple big runs from Ken Walker. So keep that run game going, control the clock. And then Mike mentioned this earlier this week, but it's games like these, they come down to the situational stuff. Red zone, they didn't do so hot last week. Get the red zone going. Third down, they've been a better third down team offensively of late. Defensively, I think they're number 1 all season in third down. So just those kind of things. Third down, field position, red zone, all those situational things that what I'm sure is going to be a tight, contested game can make all the difference.
The weather should be perfect. The stadium should be rocking. And if all goes as John and I just drew it up, we'll be back to talk about the next game on the schedule. But either way, we'll be back with you next week for another edition of the Seahawks Insiders Podcast.